Maeve was standing in my kitchen at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, holding a wooden spoon like it had done something personally offensive to her. "I'm telling you," she said, stirring whatever was in the pot with the energy of someone settling a grudge. "This is not thickening. This has decided not to thicken. This soup has given up." I was leaning against the counter with a dish towel over my shoulder, watching her tilt the spoon sideways and let the broth run off it like water. "It needs more time," I said. "It's had 20 minutes. Soup doesn't care about your schedule." She turned around and looked at me with the exact expression she used when I said something she considered profoundly unhelpful. "James, I have been standing at this stove since 9:15. The soup knows what it's doing, and what it's doing is mocking me." Behind her, the pot made a slow bubbling sound, like it was agreeing with her. This had started because Maeve's oven broke. Not in a dramatic way. No smoke, no explosion, no moment worth telling people about. It just stopped heating past 150, and then sent her a cheerful error code she described over text as probably fine but also possibly the end. She had been planning to make a roasted vegetable soup for her work lunches all week. Instead, she showed up at my apartment at 9 with 2 canvas bags of groceries, and the expression of someone who had already done the math and decided this was fine, actually. I had been reading. I had been very comfortable. I had been 11 pages from the end of a chapter. I let her in immediately. That was the thing about Maeve. Canceling on her wasn't something I even considered. It wasn't that she would have been upset, it was that not having her in my apartment felt like a worse evening than whatever I'd had planned. We had known each other for 4 years, which had started the way most things in my life that mattered started. Badly. And by accident. A mutual friend's going away dinner at a Thai place on Ossington. September. Everyone crammed around a table that was too small for the group. I ended up beside Maeve because the seating had been assigned by someone who didn't understand how chairs worked. She had introduced herself by stealing a spring roll off my plate before we had exchanged names. "That was mine," I said. "You weren't eating it," she said. "I was getting to it. It looked lonely. I didn't know what to do with that. I ate the rest of my spring rolls immediately, just in case." By the end of the night, we had argued about whether the restaurant had been too loud to constitute a good time. Agreed on the answer. Yes, but that was the point. And traded numbers because she said she needed someone in the neighborhood who could tell her where to get good roti. I didn't know where to get good roti. I figured that out later and texted her the address. She texted back a voice memo of herself eating it, which was 4 seconds of chewing and then, "Okay, you're useful, I'll keep you." 4 years of that. 4 years of her deciding I was useful and keeping me accordingly. In my kitchen, she had moved on from the soup and was now slicing the bread I had left on the counter, which she had not asked permission to do, which meant she felt at home, which meant I was trying not to think too hard about what that meant. "Can I ask you something?" she said, not looking up from the cutting board. "You're already cutting my bread without asking. I think we're past permissions." At-ays. I was getting to the asking. She set the knife down. "Do you ever think about the fact that we've never actually had a bad fight?" I thought about that. We fight constantly. We bicker. That's different. She turned around and crossed her arms, leaning back against the counter. "I mean an actual fight. Where one of us says something, and the other one goes home feeling bad about it." "No," I said, because it was true. I had thought about this before, in the loose way you think about things you don't want to examine directly.
"Why?"
She shrugged, but it wasn't a real shrug. It was the kind she did when she already knew what she wanted to say, and was just figuring out how to land it. "My coworker was asking about you today. She wanted to know what the deal was." "What deal?" "With us." Maeve picked up a slice of bread and held it like she needed something to do with her hands. "I told her you were my best friend. She asked how long. I said 4 years. she said. Maeve did a voice I assumed was meant to be her coworker, slightly higher-pitched and very amused. 4 years and he's just your friend? I looked at the pot. The soup was finally doing something. Small bubbles forming at the edges, which felt like bad timing. What did you say? I asked. I said yes, obviously. She paused. She seemed like she didn't believe me. People always. I started, I know. She nodded before I finished. I know, people always assume. We've been doing this for 4 years and people always assume. We let that sit there for a moment. The soup bubbled. The range hood hummed. She's not wrong to be confused, Maeve said quieter. I'm a little confused. I looked at her then, because there was something different in her voice. Not upset, not anything dramatic. Just honest in a way she wasn't always, and Maeve was usually one of the most honest people I knew. About what? I asked. She looked at the bread in her hand, then at me. About why we've never talked about it. I did what I always did when something came too close to being serious between us. I turned back to the stove. The soup's ready, I said. She let me get away with it. For about 30 seconds. Then she said, James, bowls are in the second cabinet. James, there's a ladle in the drawer by. I know where your ladle is, she said it gently. I know where everything in your kitchen is. I stopped stirring. She was right. She knew which drawer stuck. She knew I kept the good mugs on the second shelf, because the first shelf was too high. She knew I stacked my cutting boards sideways in the cabinet, and that I always bought the same brand of sparkling water, and that I had a mug from a camping trip 5 years ago that I never used but also never threw away. She knew all of that the way you knew things about a place you visited so often it started to feel like yours. I put the ladle down. I don't know what I'm doing, I said. It came out lower than I meant it to. Maeve didn't move from the counter. With what? Any of this. I turned around. She was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Careful, like she was listening. Harder than usual. Every time I go on a date, I spend the whole evening thinking about what I'd tell you about it after. Not what's happening in front of me. Just how I'm going to describe this to Maeve. Whether she'd find the thing he said at the second glass of wine as weird as I do. Whether she'd have ordered the same thing off the menu. Write in the comments. Do you think I should have said what came next? Or was I about to ruin the only thing in my life that was working? Maeve's expression shifted. Just slightly. He, she repeated. The guy from the app. I looked at the floor for a second. The last 3 guys from the app. Doesn't matter who. They've all been fine and I've gone home every time thinking about you. The range hood was very loud suddenly. Maeve set the bread down on the counter. James, she said, and her voice had gone careful in a different way now. Are you telling me what I think you're telling me? I don't know what I'm telling you, I said. Which was only partly true. I know that I've been trying to figure out why nothing sticks, and I keep arriving at the same answer, and then I ignore it because it's terrifying. She was quiet for long enough that I started to think about what it would feel like to take it back. I could laugh. I could say something about the soup. I could become a person who needed to check on the bread urgently. How long? She asked. That seems like a rude question for the situation. How long, James? I rubbed the back of my neck. There was this night about a year ago. You had just been turned down for that grant. The big one. You came over and you weren't even upset in the normal way. You were quiet, which was worse. You sat on my couch and we watched something neither of us cared about, and you fell asleep somewhere around the second episode. And I sat there thinking. I stopped. What? She said. Not a question. Soft. That I didn't want to wake you up. I wanted you to just stay. Maeve looked at me. Not because it was convenient, I said. Because having you there felt like, I don't know. Like the apartment was doing what it was supposed to. She inhaled slowly. You never said anything. I know. You let me complain about every bad date you went on. You gave me advice. I know. That is extremely something. Her voice cracked a little on the word something, but not like she was about to cry. More like she was trying to be precise about something difficult. James, I gave you advice about those guys. I told you the second one was boring. I told you the third one had red flags. You were right about both. I know I was right. She put her hands flat on the counter. I'm right a lot, that's not the point. She looked at the ceiling for a second, like she was counting, then back at me. I told my coworker you were just my friend, and I was walking home thinking about how quickly I said it and I didn't feel certain. Maeve. I didn't feel uncertain either, she said quickly. I didn't know what I felt. I still don't. That's what I was trying to tell you earlier. And you went to check on the soup. The soup needed checking. The soup was fine. She shook her head, but not in an annoyed way. 4 years, James. I've known where your ladle is for 3 of them. I looked at her. She was in a sweater I had never seen before, which meant she had bought it recently. Which meant she had bought it. Which there were still things about Maeve that were new, even after 4 years of knowing her so well that I could map her moods by the way she texted back. She looked at me the way she did when we were arguing about something that mattered, focused, a little tired, not looking for an exit. I'm not good at this, I said. I know. I don't mean I'm bad at relationships in the abstract. I mean specifically, saying things out loud, before it's too late to still say them, normally. Also something I know. You're not helping. She almost smiled. I'm not going to help you say it, you have to do that part. I exhaled. I think about you every day. I'm not saying it's dramatic, I just mean it's constant. You're in my head, when something good happens, and when something goes wrong, and when nothing happens at all, and I'm just eating toast at 7 in the morning. You're the first person I want to tell things to. Maeve's expression changed. Not all at once. It was more like watching something she'd been holding, steady for a long time, stop requiring the effort. And I've been acting like, that's just what best friends are, I said. Because it was easier. Because I didn't want to be someone who accidentally made you uncomfortable, and then lost the whole thing trying to say too much. She looked down at her hands on the counter. Then back up. James. Yeah. I used to tell myself that I texted you first because you were reliable. She was speaking slowly, like she was checking each word before she used it. That I came over because it was easy. That I knew where your ladle was, because that's just what happens when 2 people are close. She paused. I told myself a lot of things. And now? She looked at me for a long moment. And now I'm standing in your kitchen at midnight, and I don't want to go home. I wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. My brain started cycling through options. Something careful, something that gave her room to take it back if she needed to. Something that didn't put either of us in an impossible position. I was very close to saying something responsible. Instead I said, the soup is getting cold. Maeve stared at me. We could eat first, I said, and then keep talking. She covered her face with one hand. That is genuinely the least romantic pivot you could have made. I'm trying to be practical. You confessed feelings and pivoted to dinner. You're the one who came here to cook. She dropped her hand and looked at me, and she was laughing. Not politely, not nervously, the real kind that made her lean forward slightly and shake her head. You are impossible, she said. I'm consistent. That's the same thing, coming from you. She pushed off the counter and grabbed 2 bowls from the cabinet, second one, without looking, because of course she knew, and set them on the counter beside the stove. She ladled soup into them carefully, and I cut more bread. And for a few minutes my kitchen was just the sound of us doing the thing we had come here to do. We ate standing up because that was how we always ate when it was late. And there hadn't been a plan. She leaned against the counter. I sat on the edge of the table. The soup was fine, actually. Better than fine. She had put something in it that I couldn't identify, but that tasted like the right call. You said a year ago. She said after a while. The night of the grant. I cried in your bathroom. I didn't think you knew. I heard the tap running for 12 minutes. She looked into her bowl. I was embarrassed. You didn't need to be. I know, but you never said anything about it, and I thought. She stopped. I thought you were being polite. I was being careful, I said. There's a difference. She looked up. What were you being careful about? Not making it weird. Not adding something to a bad night that I couldn't take back. I set my bowl down. You came over because you needed to not be alone. I didn't think that was the right moment to tell you that I checked my phone 3 times that afternoon. Hoping you'd text. Maeve went quiet for a second. You checked your phone 3 times. Because you wanted me to text. Because I wanted an excuse to see you. I shrugged, which felt inadequate for what I was actually saying. That's what I mean. It wasn't just the bad nights. It was the regular Tuesday afternoons, when I had no reason to reach out, and I did it anyway, because it felt strange not to. She set her bowl on the counter. Her expression was doing something complicated that I couldn't fully read, which didn't happen often with Maeve. I could usually read Maeve. I brought you back a keychain from Halifax, she said suddenly. I know, you brought me a keychain from Halifax. You said it was a joke gift. It wasn't. I looked at her. What was it? I was in Halifax for a conference I didn't want to go to, and I was wandering around the waterfront by myself. And I found this little shop, and I spent 40 minutes looking at keychains because I was thinking about what you'd like. She said it very evenly, like she had rehearsed being calm about it, and I bought you one and I told myself it was a joke because that felt easier than the other option. I thought about the keychain. It had a tiny lighthouse on it. I still used it. It was on my keys right now, on the hook by the door. 4 years of that, I said. She nodded. 4 years of that. We are not smart people. We're very smart people who made a very dumb decision to not talk about this. Same outcome. She smiled, but it faded into something more serious. I'm scared, she said. Not of you specifically. Just, she looked at her hands. You're the person I call when something goes wrong. You're the person I call when something goes right. And I can't figure out how to feel about it. I don't know what happens if we try this and it doesn't work, and then I don't have that anymore. I've thought about that every time I almost said something, I told her. For about 1.5 years. She looked up. 1.5 years. I said 1 year because the grant night was when I stopped being able to ignore it. I didn't say that was when it started. Maeve absorbed that. She had a way of listening that made you feel like she was actually processing what you said instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. It was one of the things I had noticed about her in the first month and never stopped noticing. What do you want to happen? She asked. Tonight? Or generally? Generally. I thought about it honestly, which I owed her. I want to find out, I said. I'm not standing here telling you I have a plan. I don't know what it looks like. I just know that every time I imagine my life 6 months from now, or 2 years from now, you're in it. And trying to make that not true hasn't worked. She looked at me for a long time. The kitchen was quiet enough that I could hear the fridge cycling on. The keychain is on your keys, she said. I can see it from here. I glanced at the hook by the door. The lighthouse keychain, scratched a little now from 1.5 years of daily use. It's a good keychain. It has a tiny lighthouse on it. I like houses. You've never mentioned lighthouses once in 4 years. I like this lighthouse. Maeve made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something else. She pushed off the counter and crossed the kitchens toward the door. And for one completely stupid second, I thought she was leaving. Thought I had read the whole room wrong, and she needed air, and I had made a mess of something that had been fine. But she stopped in front of me and looked up, which she had to do slightly because I had about 4 inches on her, which I had always been aware of, in a way I had never let myself think too hard about. James, she said. Yeah, I'm not going home. I let that land. Okay, I mean, I'm going home eventually. I live there. But not. She stopped and laughed at herself. Not right now. Not because of this, okay, I said again, softer. She looked at the keychain on the hook, then at me. I think I've been bringing you back things from every trip I've taken, she said, and I kept telling myself it was just something people did. For friends. Is. What do you think it was? She reached up and straightened my collar, which didn't need straightening. Her hand stayed there for a second, at the edge of my shoulder. I think it was me trying to tell you something I didn't know how to say out loud. I covered her hand with mine. She didn't move it. You could have just said it, I told her. Whenever. I would have been here, I know. She looked at me. I know you would have. That was part of the problem. You were always so. She stopped. There, just there, and I kept thinking, what if I say something and it changes what this is and then I lose the person who is always just there? You weren't going to lose me, I said. You don't know that. I know that. Every single time I thought about not saying anything, the thing I was just afraid of losing was you. I looked at her. The only scenario where I actually lose you is the one where we keep doing this for another 4 years, and one of us eventually can't anymore. Maeve was quiet. Her hand was still on my shoulder, and mine was still over hers, and we were standing in my kitchen at almost midnight, with 2 bowls of soup going cold on the counter. Okay, she said, very quietly. Okay, I said. She leaned in and kissed me before I had a plan. It was brief and careful. The kind of thing that asks a question instead of answering one. When she pulled back, she looked at me like she was waiting to see what I did with it. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't have a speech. I just thought about the keychain and the tap running for 12 minutes. And every Tuesday afternoon I had texted her for no reason, and then I kissed her back, slower, with my hand still over hers. When we stopped, she leaned her forehead against my chin. This is strange, she said. Good strange or bad strange, I don't know yet. She tilted her head up. Ask me in an hour. I asked her in an hour. We were on the couch by then, the soup reheated and eaten properly this time, the bread finished. She was sitting sideways with her feet tucked under her, which was how she always sat on my couch, which she had been doing for 4 years. Good strange, she said. Definitively. High praise. It's the best kind of strange. She looked at me. I'm still scared. I know. I'm probably going to overthink this for the next 2 weeks. I'll be here for all of it. She nodded, like she was filing that away. I'm also, she said, keeping the leftover soup. I expected nothing less. It's in a container in your fridge. Where else would it be? She smiled and looked out the window at the street below, at the yellow light from the building across, at the thin slice of night sky between the buildings. November in Toronto was its own particular thing. The cold that settled in for keeps, the leaves long gone. The sky that kind of gray that was more blue than gray once you got used to it. I had looked at this window 100 times with her, beside me. Somehow it looked different now, not in a way I could describe cleanly. Just different in the way things look when you stop pretending not to see them. 3 weeks later, almost nothing had changed. That was the part that surprised me most. We still got takeout from the same Thai place on nights. When neither of us felt like cooking, she still texted me at odd hours about things that were not emergencies but felt like they needed saying. A podcast episode she thought I'd hate but should still listen to. A photo of her building's elevator stuck open again. A question about whether she had left her umbrella at my place. She had. I still called her on the walk home from the subway when the day had been long. In a specific way that was hard to explain to someone who hadn't known me for 4 years. What was different was that I didn't look away anymore. When she came over and sat on my couch in the way she'd been sitting on my couch for 3 years and fell asleep halfway through something we were watching, I didn't start cataloging reasons why that was fine and normal and not a thing I was allowed to want. I just let it be what it was. She stayed until morning. We made eggs. She left for work and texted me 20 minutes later about the podcast. We went for a walk along the waterfront on a Sunday, which we had done before, except this time she reached over and took my hand without preamble, without asking, without making it a thing. Just took my hand, like it was the obvious next thing to do. I looked down at our hands and then at her. "What?" she said. "Nothing, you're doing the face." "I have a face now?" "You've always had a face, I just didn't used to be the cause of it." She bumped her shoulder into mine. "Good face or bad face?" I looked at her, at the November light, and the water and the lighthouse out on the pier, which I had apparently always liked without knowing it. "Good face," I said. For 4 years I had called Maeve my best friend, like it was the full story. It wasn't a lie. I just hadn't understood yet. That best friend was the beginning of the sentence. Not the end. The actual end had been right there the whole time. Every time she walked through my door knowing where the ladle was. Every time she texted at 11 p.m. about nothing in particular. Every time she sat sideways on my couch like she'd been there 100 times. She had been there 100 times. That was always the whole point.